From the duffel, Jonah pulled out the first piece of equipment, a grappling hook with a long line of cable attached to it. The hook's launcher had a very sophisticated sight, allowing Jonah to aim the grappling hook precisely where he needed it to go. He lifted it carefully into the air, peering into the viewer. The sight was also equipped with an anemometer, a device used to measure the wind's speed and direction. Jonah frowned. He was a pretty good shot, but the wind was unpredictable tonight. Even with this launcher, he could easily miss the target if his aim wasn't dead on. Before Bolivar was buried there, the Pantheon had been a church. It was a pale structure covered with intricate blue-gray ornamentation around the windows. The Pantheon had 3 towers, 2 shorter ones on either side, and one in the center that stretched high above the rest of the building. Jonah's target was a small window on the tallest tower. As the final resting place of some of the most important figures in Venezuela's history, the Pantheon was full of guards patrolling the grounds at night. He couldn't exactly walk through the front door, but he only had one shot at getting the grappling hook secured to the window. If he missed, it would fall to the ground and be seen by the nearest patrol. His cover would be blown, and he'd have to flee before Venezuela's favorite hip-hop star was caught trying to break into a national monument. Jonah removed a rock climbing harness from his bag and put it on, placing the straps around his body and checking to be sure that all the buckles were secure. Then he moved around to the side of the bush, holding a pair of night vision binoculars to his eyes and surveying the grounds of the Pantheon. 2 guards were disappearing around the site of the former church. Jonah stood, planted his feet firmly in the ground, and aimed. The wind was gusting strongly now. The moment Jonah locked on to his target, the wind changed and he had to adjust to compensate. He couldn't seem to get a good fix on the window, but the guards would be reappearing soon. It was now or never. Jonah adjusted his aim once more, then fired the grappling hook into the night air. Just then, the 2 guards reappeared on the far side of the Pantheon. The grappling hook made a slight whistling as it arced toward the Pantheon's window, and Jonah held his breath. The hook went straight through the window and caught snugly inside with a soft thunk. Jonah clenched his teeth, waiting to see if either guard had noticed the sound, but they continued on their patrol without looking up. Jonah let the air out of his lungs. He waited until they were out of sight again before pulling the grappling hook's cable taut and securing it to a nearby tree. Jonah clipped a carabiner on his harness to the cable and slung the duffel bag across his body. He was ready. He reached up and began to pull himself hand over hand up the cable. Soon his feet left the ground, and his body hung suspended in the air from the harness. He wore thick protective gloves with a grippy coating that allowed him to hold on to the cable without slipping. But even so, Jonah was having a hard time pulling himself backward. He hung upside down from the line like a sloth, and he moved about as fast. His biceps and back muscles started to burn, and he wished he'd spent more time in the gym. His climbing harness would keep him from dropping straight to the ground, but it wouldn't stop him from sliding back down the length of the cable. And the noise of the carabiner screeching against the metal cable would be enough to wake Bolivar from the dead. Minutes passed. Below him, Jonah heard the sound of the guards making another pass in front of the Pantheon. He worried they'd see him, but he didn't dare stop. Better to get inside as quickly as possible rather than be discovered hanging in midair, completely helpless. And then a voice rang out through the air, shattering the quiet of the night. Tu hay un hombre en el cielo. Tu mira. Sube en el Panteano. Oh no, Jonah muttered. His Spanish wasn't quite as good as his French, but he knew enough to understand that he'd been seen. Adrenaline charged through Jonah's veins as he yanked himself toward the window, higher and higher. The guards had guns, and he didn't want to find out if they were willing to use them. He was almost there, almost inside, just a few more feet left. And then he heard the unmistakable crack of a gun going off, and then another and another. Jonah winced, expecting to feel the bullets plunge into his skin at any moment. But he didn't stop moving. His hand brushed the side of the Pantheon, and he grasped the window ledge, rolling himself over so that he was balanced on top of the cable. It dug painfully into his body, but more shots rang out, and a bullet buried itself in the side of the Pantheon, half an inch from Jonah's face. He let go of the cable, making a wild grab for the window with his other hand, and tried to haul himself inside. He barely fit, and the duffel bag slung across his back slowed him down, keeping Jonah stuck in the frame. But with the last of his strength, Jonah managed to shove himself through the window, and he landed with a hard thump on the floor of the tower.